the criticism on it, but that's not why I will be going. And if there's the music from Danny at any point in there, I hope no one's sitting around me, and I better not be holding the popcorn, because the popcorn will go flying in the air as I squee like a schoolgirl. Hello, everyone. We are live here in the spoiler room. Thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, grabbing your favorite drink, and sharing movie spoilers with us as we talk Evil Dead Deaduary. It is, and we're talking films that have Evil Dead in the title but do not belong to the Sam Raimi franchise. Yes.
And yet they kind of they all have that Evil Dead in them. The Raimi Evil Dead makes its way into these unconnected movies.
I know.
How did you do it?
I know. I love it. I love it. I really do. And tonight we go back to another horror of 1988. Oh, throwback to last year. This one is Evil Dead Trap, 1988. And with me tonight, as always, the man who keeps coming back for more. And I'm surprised he's here tonight after this film.
I told you it's really helping my diet, because I didn't want to eat after watching this movie.
That's what I mean. I figured maybe you'd still be in the bathroom retching or something. I don't know. But yes, Mr. Ian Simmons, those dulcet tones are with us tonight. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm glad that we had the half-hour Patreon show talking about Super Bowl commercials, because I feel like that's gonna be some of the last laughs we have this evening. Talking about this morbid, crazy, weird film, which I dug for the most part, but man, it's rough.
And I apologize. Actually, no, I don't apologize. I completely don't apologize for not warning you ahead of time of what type of film this was.
Well, it's weird, because you kind of did last week, but the way, and I didn't look anything up about it or whatever. I just put it on, I think last week you had said that it was going to be, because last week we talked about Shaolin versus Evil Dead, which is a delightful, like, crazy action comedy, film. And you said, well, this next movie is going to be decidedly different in tone. It's going to be like heavier and more serious. So I thought it was going to be like a weird supernatural drama, but no, it's just a straight up like mean horror torture movie.
Yeah. Wow. Extreme Asian horror film, classic amongst many circles. In all honesty, this was my first time watching it. I watched the sequel, Evil Dead Trap 2, for a screener, because Unearthed Films, which distributes a lot of rare and unusual, usually extreme, not always, horror films, sent me a screener for Evil Dead Trap 2, which is a sequel in title only. But it does involve a reporter as well, but completely different story altogether. It was like, it's kind of like, I think, intended to be more of like a series title, Evil Dead Trap 2,
okay.
Kind of like to where, it's going to have some extreme kills and horror in it. And at one point, supernatural elements will work their way into it, or some kind of weird ending. It looks like that's what they were going for. Now, having watched the first one and watching the second one, it looks like that's kind of what they were trying to go with it. I'm not 100% sure on it, but this one, had a reputation of being a bit extreme, and it is. So go ahead, Ian. What's the synopsis of Evil Dead Trap?
Oh, thanks.
There's nothing but love.
It's a fascinating premise, because this is another one of those movies that came out long before you had the rise of sort of the girl power, strong, empowered woman character movement in the last 10 years. This is from 1988, and it centers on the 4-person team of TV journalists. You got like a host, a producer, I think a stylist, someone else, and then like their male associate
guy.
Yeah.
Well,
or
he's
assistant
associate
director, I think.
Assistant director,
They go out to this abandoned building in the middle of nowhere to investigate this series of videotapes that the host, the kind of primetime news program host, keeps getting. And there's scenes of like brutal torture intercut with images of her from her news broadcasts. And nobody at the station wants to invest any time or money into it, so they kind of go rogue, and these 5 people go out there themselves and run afoul of the very horrors and tortures that they were, previewed on these cassettes. I'm having trouble articulating what this movie is because it takes so many weird twists and turns that like describing it, I was like, oh yeah, that happened in this movie. Like by the time you get to the end, there's no way you could put it, like draw a straight line back to how it all started, which is kind of the genius of it. But also, it changes tempo drastically.
Yeah, it does.
It starts off as like a supernatural movie, then it becomes like a full-on gruesome, like slasher style movie, and then it just drops off into sort of nothingness for like 45 minutes, and then it comes back for this crazy whiz-bang climax, and then a bizarre Friday the 13th ending, mixed with like Basket Case. How do you find these things, Mark?
I travel in different circles than you do, sir, apparently.
All those circles are winding down into hell. I appreciate the ride, but I'm like, wow.
Oh yeah, no, I kind of knew what to expect going into it just because of the reputation of the film, even though I hadn't seen it. I had seen people talk about it, and going into it, I did not expect it to be such an amalgamation of other horror films. I mean, it does live up to that whole Evil Dead kind of idea that they're playing off of. At least that's how it was marketed to the US, Evil Dead trap. Because Evil Dead was taking off. But you do actually have Evil Dead vision in here at one point. Literally similar to what we saw at Evil Dead when the evil force is traveling through the woods. You get that here, only it's in black and white, but there is we learn later it's not necessarily a spirit. It's a spirit, yet maybe creature. It's hard to say. But yeah, you've got that in here. You've got your slasher in here, kind of your Friday the 13th, where you get a masked character who's offing people with sharp pointy objects and such.
and with the aid of the supernatural, kind of. I mean,
kind of, right.
There's the bit where the one girl, she opens up a closet door and this corpse falls out, and she like throws herself back against a wall, and immediately like all of these like large spikes come out of the floor and out of the wall and the ceiling. That didn't look like a trap. It almost looked like, again, like a supernatural guided thing to skewer her, because I don't know how the hell you'd set something like that up. It wasn't like spring loaded.
No,
but that was the kind of interesting element of, because at the end of it, we're having trouble kind of articulating what the hell this spirit or whatever it is about, right, because it's very ambiguous. The nearest I can think of it was almost like one of those in utero, twins. And one,
right?
What was that movie that came out last year?
Malignant.
Malignant. I didn't see it, but I know the twist and all that.
Right. Yeah.
It was kind of
very
like
much
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very much like Malignant. And that's what's funny is you watch Evil Dead Trap from 1988, and it's like you could pick out a number of things that you would see later on pop up in other horror films after it. Like, like this film had some impact, some I would like to think some inspirational impact on some future horror filmmakers and writers. It had to have, because there's no way you get a film like this with this much similarity to other films later, that after it came out. While they're not uncommon themes in here, it's just the way some things are even framed and shot, and even some of the kills, you're just like when you watch an Alfred Hitchcock movie, you're like, wow, okay, I think I see where a couple of those influences originated from, and not in a bad way. I'm just saying that this film has a lot of that in it.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, um, The Ring.
Hmm.
You got the weird VHS tapes, but more specifically, some of those black and white shots you mentioned, they had that kind of like highly, washed out, overexposed black and white to them, and you've got the disturbing kind of unrelated images, a lot of eyeball stuff. I mean, I know The Ring was adapted from a novel, you know,
Right.
several
Hmm.
years after this, but I almost got the feeling that the author of that book might have seen Evil Dead Trap and been like, "Hey, this could make a great book."
Yeah, well, I mean, because our late night host, Nami, it's a late host, and she shows videos tapes that viewers send in, and that's how she was smart enough. Again, this is what I thought was interesting. Is here we have a journalist who knows not to show the murder tape that she was sent on air. She's gotten a few of these apparently, and she's chosen not to show it on air. Only this one seemed a little more personal because it's intercut with images of her. So I kind of liked that angle with it. But you're right with the VHS tape or 3/4 inch tape. She literally had a 3/4 inch deck. I was like, oh man, this is definitely showing its age. But yeah, there's a little bit of ring in there. Like we mentioned, basket case later on when you get to the wildly bizarre, like, oh, I think it's just a spirit talking. Nay, nay, it's not a spirit talking. No, no, it's this being that's living inside this one guy who you think is, who is trying to be kind of an ally to our main final girl, Nami. Uh, but there's a little bit of there's split in here going
Yeah.
on. There's so much other horror films that come later I saw in this one. It was boggling. It was really
Right. I mean, it's talking about Friday the 13th. Well, I'll get specifically to what I
Mhm.
was talking about at the when we talk about the end, but and I'm sure this character is a trope in other movies, but I always just go back to Friday the 13th, the final chapter, because it's the first time I really like saw it. But he
Sure.
reminded me of the character of Rob, who was
Mhm.
this kind of survivalist guy that he's out looking for his sister, who would turn out was butchered in part two. In this movie, he just kind of shows up in this abandoned, I don't know, was it a school or a factory? What the hell
No,
was
as
this
it
place?
was I think it was like a government facility. And this is the thing is, it's not outlined in here. You don't get a lot of exposition of, like, say, origin of what's going on, but there's some implications going on if you kind of pay attention. One is where this place is, this location that they deem where this guy was doing the killings, uh, is on a map, and even the condo, the one guy of the group says in this is supposed to be an empty field, and
Right.
instead it's this whole facility, almost like a government facility. There's a warning sign on the outside that said government don't let you in. And then later on, when we meet the one guy who says he's looking for his brother, who, spoiler everyone,
It's
though
in the title.
you can kind it's in the title of our show, folks. You see it kind of coming that he he's one and the same. Who he's looking for isn't himself, and so he's got this mutation, a la basket case, that's growing inside him that makes him do bad things. It almost the way I pieced it together in my own head as I watch it is this was a secret government facility. This guy was a victim of an experiment that was left behind when the facility was abandoned or whatnot. And that creature that was with him is some kind of mutant that was designed from experiments done at that facility that they're at, which wasn't anywhere on the map. That's what I gathered from it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing when because you don't know what kind of movie this is when you're starting out, right?
No.
Especially when you think Evil Dead, you think, oh, it's all supernatural. So when they showed up in a condo, his name was, he was like, this place isn't supposed to be here. I thought, ooh, it's like a haunted place. And at the end, they're going to find out that there was never a building here. But no, picking up on what you're talking about, given this is 88,
Mhm.
so, the whole idea, like later on, um, was it Nari? Was that her name?
Nami.
Nami, okay.
Mhm.
Nami discovers, sort of the lair of this, these weird twins or brothers, and there's pictures kind of nailed to the wall of a mom and one little boy, even though the guy keeps referring to, he's looking for his younger brother who's always causing trouble. Um, I'm placing this. I'm wondering if maybe the mother was like a victim of like Hiroshima radiation or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
From, it would have been, 40
Mhm.
plus years ago. That might put it just around the same age as this guy and maybe this thing that was growing inside. So perhaps that was she was like a studied at this facility, and I don't know what happened. The baby developed psychic powers as it grew within its womb slash brother. So it was growing inside the brother, inside the mom. Wow, this is
Yes.
this is a
Yes.
nesting doll of terror.
A nesting doll of terror. Yeah, which makes him dress up as the guy who would become the inspiration of I know what you did last summer, killer. Because he kept reminding me of it when I'm like, where's your hook, man?
There's
Um
also a bit of the like the Prowler, I guess,
the
the Tom
Prowler,
Savini
yeah,
movie.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's weird kind of like full hooded face. And yeah, it's great because some of the deaths, like I kind of mentioned, feel supernaturally inspired.
Hmm.
Some of them are, straight up, slasher kills. And there's this one, maybe you can help me out with this, because after the movie was over, I realized, oh wait, there was that weird guy in the Jeep. What
Oh, yeah.
how was he connected? Because
Well,
one of the, team, she actually escapes and makes it outside the facility once they realize, all hell's breaking loose. She goes to the Jeep, and she's about to get away when she's attacked from some guy in the back seat who we think, "Oh, he's just gonna choke her to death." But then we cut away, and there's, like, several scenes, and then we cut back to the Jeep, and he's in the process of forcefully having his way with her, and it's goes on
yeah.
for way too long.
Yeah, it is such an uncomfortable I mean, it's supposed to be, but it did not need to, but this rape scene goes on way too long.
Well, it's
But
also
this
like there's a sex scene earlier on that also goes on for, way too long, and you start wondering like, am I gonna see everything? Because that's kind of where this is going. So yeah, it's definitely I don't know if attitudes have changed that much in terms of international cinema, but it just seems like the kind of thing, oh yeah, it was the 80s, but you're not gonna show that stuff today.
not quite, no, not like that, I don't think. Yeah, the love scene between uh Rye and Kondo, who we find out he tried to they tried to hook up earlier, as the kids would say, but he was too drunk and couldn't get it up. And then when they get scared, they're in this facility, and suddenly, oh hey, he's inspired after saving her from uh, uh, almost getting hurt, and so they decide, yeah, you know what, this is a perfect time in this grubby factory room area that definitely just is not, yeah, that
It
did not
remind It reminded me of the scene that we've talked about from Slaughter High, where the couple is in the
yes,
abandoned high school and they do it on the bed that gets electrocuted. I was just waiting for
yes.
that.
I was too. I was waiting for the killer, because we're like, you get the classic, okay, you've got two people having sex now, so where's your killer to come out and kill them? Your morality plays slasher, but it doesn't play out like that. They actually, you know, get through the act with no problem. Although uh he's is dealing with her jacket, which got dirty because to go figure, the place is filthy. And he's trying to clean it. I got a trip out of that. But it, it's interesting because these characters, what I liked is these characters felt at least a little bit more than just fodder, killer fodder. These characters are our characters. We spend a little bit of time with them to get to know them. They aren't just your, oh, they're ready to be killed. You know, they give a little backstory with this group on how Nami is fighting to keep her show on the air. There's a commentary later on about how they're a unique show in that they have an all-female production crew, which they said people used to have an interest in but don't anymore. So they're making a little commentary. I mean, there's bits and pieces as we go along, even with the bizarre and the strange horror shit, that gives these characters at least a little bit more to it than just, oh, they're just victims in waiting.
Right. I mean, and that's the other thing that's kind of refreshing to see is they're all adults. I
Yeah.
mean, they don't necessarily always make the best decisions, like, having sex in the middle of this abandoned government facility, when there's weird stuff going on. But yeah, it also, the sexual politics isn't a thing. Like, it's mentioned, but it's,
Mhm.
at the beginning, but it's mentioned in a way that it's not like there's the chauvinist boss who's like, we're never going to let four chicks put together a news program. It's, the public was interested in it for a while, and now they're interested in something else. So they felt like they had to do something kind of extreme to keep their jobs. That's an angle I haven't really seen in,
Mhm.
movies that kind of tackle these sort of, gender politics. And it was a very apolitical kind of movie. Um, I loved that the girl who escapes, even though horrible things happen to her after she gets out, it's not predictable what
Mhm.
happens to her, because there's a scene where all four, or I think four of them at that point, were running down this corridor, and then there's sort of an avalanche, and the one girl,
Mhm.
she's like running ahead, and there's like a mini avalanche, and then more stuff falls. So typically she would get like caved in and crushed and horribly killed because she split off from the group. But it's because she split off from the group, she was able to get outside. And
Yeah.
so that was like, okay, now I don't know where this story is going, because when she gets outside, it's still daylight out, and you feel like, oh, she's gonna get away. And maybe it's the thing where she comes back later with the authorities, but it's too late because all this horrible stuff has happened. But no, it just keeps taking these great escalatory turns, and yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, it does, and that's what I really liked. I mean, you have your shock factor in the beginning when we see the tape from Nami. We see this
Oh,
really brutal kill, this torture kill, which it ends up the girl in the video that's getting killed and tortured, that Nami watches. That's a corpse that shows up later on that scares the girl who gets skewered. Um, but it is disturbing. There's, if you don't like eye things happening, don't watch, because this
it's
Ian.
the it's the clinical nature of this kill, because I've
Yeah.
seen movies where people get, stuff shoved in their eyes or whatever, or
Mhm.
shot, and it's just like, oh, it's just like blood and stuff.
Mhm.
This is, the blade like piercing through the different layers of the eye, and it's like clear gel and goo kind of like pour out. And it's like, this is too much. No, just stop. I can't look away, but I don't want to watch.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You can't look away. But again, 80s practical gore effects all
Mm.
around, all looked uh, uh, fantastically disturbing. Is the way you can put it. Is disturbing yet fantastic. Plus some of the other gimmicks they put in later on. As we mentioned, we've got this one guy who shows up in the van who takes advantage, who just attacks this the one who got away, who we're hoping would get away. Nope, she doesn't. She ends up getting just brutally attacked and violated. But this guy who showed up, he's a servant of the killer, who we don't know at this time is the same as Mr. Suave brother. Um, and he was sent out to stop her so he could be free. Um,
Yeah, that's the thing, because he mentioned, and that's why I was asking you if you had figured out that connection.
right.
Because what's really disturbing isn't just the rape; it's the fact that right before he does this, I think it's like when he starts to choke her, he's
Yeah.
like saying, they took, like, I had a daughter, she was 12 years old, and they took her eyes or something like
Yeah.
that, or like they did
Mhm.
horrible things. And then next we cut, when we cut back to them, he's like sexually assaulting her. I'm like, dude, you just talked about, how much you
Yeah.
miss your 12-year-old daughter, and what are you doing? I
Well,
get that maybe he felt it was his only chance to get away or something because he was in thrall to this demon child. I don't know. It's that got really murky as to his relationship with that whole thing.
well, he shows up in just a short scene very early on with a ball gag in his mouth. So he's been at the facility for a while, held as a prisoner by our killer, and he's let go to help stop them from escaping. The sexual assault part of it was by his own choice. He's only supposed to kill her,
Right.
but he decides, as he says, to take advantage of the situation because it's been so long and whatnot. He's going to enjoy this, unfortunately, which almost implies maybe he was assaulted in some way as well. It's hard to say with that, not necessarily sexually, but definitely mentally. He's been severely abused.
Oh yeah, he's been put through the ringer, but I'm just trying to think, and I know when you're talking about horror movies, as I've been told during the many discussions I've had on giallo films in the last few years, you start to think about it, you're missing the point. But
Right? Yeah.
I feel like there needed to be some kind of connection. Like, as we see the little kid, Hideki,
Yeah.
he has a psychic control over his older brother in whom he's embedded, right?
Right.
It would have been interesting to see if he had some kind of a hold on this, rapist henchman guy,
Yeah.
because I'm thinking, all right, yeah, I'm going to send you out to make sure this girl doesn't leave. If I was that dude, I'd just be like riding in the back of the van till I got back to the city so I could be free.
And where I was going with this, with the gimmick, was leading up to this scene, because this scene, we come back to it a couple of times. It's brutal. It's but he does get it, because he was only supposed to kill her. So when the killer shows up, like to check up or whatever, he ends up killing the guy. He gets killed. The girl tries to escape, and there's this crazy kill. Her kill is wild, because there's this metal wired noose that gets thrown around her neck, and she gets dragged up over the van and then pulled on the other side and lands on her neck to break her neck. And the way they do it with the effects, why this kill, it just makes you cringe and go, "Oh my god," is because how real it looks. You're like, "Where was the cut?" Because she's up on top of the van scrambling, and suddenly they pull, and you watch the body fall in the head. You hear
And
and
it
you're
doesn't look like a shitty dummy either.
no, it doesn't
No.
look like a shitty dummy at all. And I'm just like, "Whoa, okay."
Well, that's the other. There's that supernatural element to it too,
Mhm.
because the rapist guy, when he's on top of her, he, like a spike, flies from out of the woods somewhere through the van and like impales in the back of the head. I think it comes through his mouth or
Right.
something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the garrote, the metal noose or whatever, that just kind of, it's almost like God was going fishing. It just comes out of the sky and lifts her up and does that whole thing. We don't see the killer comes in later to collect the bodies,
Right.
when Nami is hiding behind the tires of the van. So it's unclear. Like, was that all
Well,
Hideki doing that?
no, we do see the killer's boots after after she gets her neck broke with the metal. We do see the killer's boots.
We do. Okay, I
Yeah,
missed that part. I think I was still in
because
shock.
the guy gets killed. This poor woman goes through the hell before she gets killed. The bolt goes through the guy's mouth, and it bleeds all over
Oh yeah. Yeah,
her.
that poor actress. Like, I know it was
Yeah.
just like, food
Oh
dye
my
or
god.
whatever, but she had her
That's
mouth open as all this stuff was like falling into her face.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and then she tried to escape the van, and that's where the flying noose comes out. But you do see the killer, so it is implied at least that he threw it, but he's only briefly there.
But
You can barely, but
but it doesn't make any sense, like how he was able to
No.
manipulate or even.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I think there's an implied supernatural element, which again, I apologize to everyone. I'm not that knowledgeable on this series, but from watching the second one as well, that one kind of plays out, where it's in kind of reality. There's a little bit of hinted at supernatural stuff, but you don't get like the wild, weird thing until the end that it's actually supernatural, could be supernatural till the end. And it feels like that's what it was going for here as well, is that you have this event and all of a sudden you get the weird supernatural part. Yeah, because we get the bolt scene later on. This amazing scene that Jigsaw would have went, I wish I would have thought of that. He was like, now that's a game. So Nami, her one friend appears to be alive near the end here, and she's trapped in a room, and she's trying to find what room she's in, and they've painted up her friend's face, and her friend's strapped to this table. Looks like something bad's going to happen to her. And Nami discovers what room she's in, but the door is locked, so she's trying to force the lock.
Well, first she sees her friend on these TVs,
right?
And she's calling to her. She's got her mouth open. She's like, "Where? Come find me. Where are you?" But when we see where she actually is in that room, she's got the ball gag in her mouth for a very specific reason. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. So you got the closed circuit TV. So then on the video, they tell her where to go. But yes, the girl actually has the ball gag, which again could be the supernatural element implied that it played that video, and the supernatural element to it could have been they played that video, even though she really has her ball gag, but the supernatural ghost part on the video saying, giving Nami direction of where she's at.
I just hope it wasn't the same ball gag that the other guy had.
No, I think it was a different one. But anyway,
we have to tell that to ourselves in order to sleep at night.
I'll tell. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. I'm not going to go back and watch it, which color it was and whatnot. I don't know. I'm good. But so Nami finds the door, and we get this wonderful shot of Nami on the other side of the door as Nami's pushing. We get to see the inside of the room, and we follow this cable, and it's a beautiful shot. That's the thing. This film is wonderfully shot in so many ways. We get this camera, and it just kind of follows the cable as Nami is continually to try to get in the room. So the cable's shaking, and we see it, and also we see it's attached to the trigger of this crossbow that has a silver bolt that's pointed to her friend's head, kind of a la, doing the old William Tell thing. And you're like, oh crap. Well, Nami busts in, the bolt gets shot, but her friend is able to move her head out of the way. Oh, it's like, you got that. Hey, she dodged the trap. She dodged the trap. And even Nami's like, oh, great. And she runs into the room and hits a second tripwire, which brings this machete down and cuts into her friend's head, and is slowly, because of the tension, slowly pushing its way further into her friend's head as she's staring at it. It's like, oh my, again, another very realistic, practical gimmick that just like yeah,
and they really do spend the time to like watch these people bleed out. I mean, it's ghoulish, but the effects are just, they're really, it's morbid, but it's fun to watch. You're like, wow, how are they pulling this off? I mean, the actors do really good pretending to be dead, because they don't do these with dummies. The actors are just standing still while these tubes and all this blood is pouring out of them. It's really quite impressive.
And in some respects, that really does feel like it's harkening back to some Italian horror. Some of the way that the death and that, and how the brutality and such of this, some of that Italian horror influences as well can be showing up in here. You don't have the color, but as far as the deaths, you got the gloved killer, you got sharp objects and such going on. We get a one shot of the killer holding the knife to where it's just the hand and the knife, and it glints in the light type of thing.
Oh yeah.
there's some of that in here too. But that was just like the spearing, the first girl to actually get killed when after she finds the corpse. When she gets speared, I'm looking at going, how did they do that? Because the first one flies through her and you're like, okay, maybe there's kind of a jump cut there. But there's the second one that comes in from the side that goes through her side. And they've got like this medium shot. You can see it going in and coming
The
out.
only thing I can think of is they had squibs under her shirt and probably like a retractable blade on the spear,
Right.
but it doesn't look like that's what's going on. It's
Well, and
so
then she
well
gets
done.
the other one like through the neck types. And the way it looks, I mean, it's brutal. But part of the brutality is how good it looks. Is That's the effectiveness of it, is because they put so much work into these effects, and that it makes these kills extra brutal, and you feel for them more. And yeah, you linger on some of these deaths for a while. These aren't like quick, killed and cut away like you get in a lot of your slasher films from the West or whatnot. No, we stay on these deaths for a while. It's crazy. And hey, we got X-Ray Punch. So glad you could join us. And they're watching in, and they commented. They said, watched this years back. This flick was as if Clive Barker and Dario Argento collabed on a J horror movie. And I think you've summed it up perfectly as far as the tone and everything with it. And, and he says James Wan totally ripped this off for Malignant. I wouldn't put it past Hollywood for sure.
Hey, everything old is new.
Everything old is new. But yeah, I love it. It sounds bad when you see such a film with like brutal deaths and extreme. You say you love it, but I enjoy seeing films like this that are crafted, and part of the enjoyment is the crafting of the story, the surprises that they bring out. Um, you know, and that's what surprise. I always love finding films like this, because you're just like, this film isn't just effective. It doesn't just have the gore, but it's well made, and the story it's telling, it makes some sense. You don't get a lot of exposition, but what you're presented is making sense. You just have to be patient.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a giant exposition dump, even
Mm-mm.
though at the end we've got it's the ending of the first Friday the 13th, where the girl wakes up in the hospital and there's the detective there. And all he had to say was, "Ma'am, we didn't find any boy," but he practically says it. They found the corpse of the older brother, but not the, Heideki. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I criticize this movie for kind of taking this lull for like 45 minutes. I think part of it is because it's the first time I'd watched it. You've got this
Mhm.
great forward momentum. Like the first half hour or so of this movie is packed. It's just like set up, creepy place, kill, 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 which could be the name of a movie itself. But
Creepy
then,
place, kill, kill, kill.
right. But then when Nami runs into our mystery suave guy,
Mhm.
really slows down. I mean, there's occasional,
It does, yeah.
jumps or twists and
Mhm.
turns here, but it isn't until we get the reveal of the reveal of the killer. Turns out, yes, it's Mr.
Mhm.
Suave, and then the reveal of the monster, that things get back on that escalatory path. It's like we take a 40-minute breather in the middle of this mayhem before we get back into the mayhem, and even the mayhem gets, chaotic. So it finishes strong. Maybe if I watch this again, I'll know what
Mhm.
I'm getting into. I'll be like, okay, here's where it's kind of gets a little different. It's not bad. It's just kind of
Yeah.
rhythmically out of place with the rest of it.
It does slow down. I mean, things are still moving forward, but you're right. As far as action and crazy things happening and all of that, it does slow down a bit. But I don't mind that bit, because again, we're spending a little more time with our characters at least, and we're not just, you don't off most of your cast within the first 20 minutes of the film like some horror films do, where you have a cast of 8 kids or whatnot, or people, and suddenly you get the one scene where like 4 of them are dead, and suddenly you're stuck with like 2 people for like 45 minutes to an hour.
what I loved this is right before I think the slowdown happens.
Mhm.
But Nami discovers one of her friends dead or something like that.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then all of a sudden she starts getting shot at by with these nails that go into this, kind of plasterboard wall behind her.
Yeah,
And
that's
she
after
gets
the crossbow scene. Yeah.
okay, that's right
Yeah,
after the
it's in that
crossbow
same
scene.
room. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. She basically gets like pinned to the wall and then she makes her way, off of these nails. And then she starts giving this triumphant, like, ha, you thought you could break me. Well, you're never going to break me and I'm going to kick your ass or whatever. And all of a sudden, like, we almost get this POV shot of this other nail, like, coming and like shooting her in the leg. And then we just see the killer standing in the doorway and he kind of like shrugs and then like walks away. Like, no, you're not that great. I still
No,
have the home field
no.
advantage. It's just like darkly comic, like
It is a little comical. It's like, ha ha, and then it's like, like, oh shit. Yeah, those are the other crossbow bolts, which again I think leads to your supernatural element of some of the kill weapons because he's not really holding a crossbow bolt, but the bolts come out of nowhere, just like the wire garrote, the flying garrote did. And yeah, X-ray punch. It's what we were saying is that he said James Wan totally ripped this off for Malignant, and he says that everyone mentions basket cakes for Malignant, but he said nah, it was this film. And he's another reason with X-ray punches says you think this movie is going to go be one way, and then it totally goes off the deep end the final third of it. And X-ray, you're right, it does, and that's what I love about it is that this story, you think it's going to be the supernatural ghost kid. We got Evil Dead vision in here, which implies supernatural, that it's borrowing from Evil Dead, the movie with the moving through with the black and white vision. And then we find out no, it's a growth on the guy, and you're just like, well, I didn't see that coming. Of all the things I saw coming, didn't see that. And I liked how they gave at least some purpose too, to where some films like this won't give a purpose of why the deaths are going on or why this individual was drawn here. But we find out that she's drawn to this group because she looks like the mom of Heideke and the brother, the suave brother.
did we ever get a name for this suave brother? Because I don't think
I
anyone
forgot
ever.
his name. I had notes, but I accidentally saved over him. I apologize, but I did have notes.
Well, the thing is, I know he's got a character name. It's probably on IMDb, but I don't remember him ever introducing himself or anyone ever like referring to him. He's just kind of there.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I don't even think he's credited at least um on IMDb. I'm not quite sure, but
I, I
go ahead.
I was gonna say real quick. I wanted to pull over real quick and say, X-Ray Punch. I love your avatar because that's taken from the Polish movie poster for Ridley Scott's Alien.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
I had to look it up real quick because at first I thought it was The Thing because I recognized that image. But yeah, that's those lovely Polish movie posters.
It's Polish movie posters are awesome. But yeah, it's just interesting where it goes with the body horror it adds in here. And there's this wonderful action piece where she's going against the brother because the suave brother dies and Hideki comes out after her. She thinks she's taking care of it, didn't work. Hideki comes out and starts flying around at her, and she's like, "Oh crap!" Explosions. There's fire. Mad props to the actors, the performers in this film because there's stuff blowing up next to her, sparking. And shit.
Well, there's the scene where she is trapped in this giant room, and there, yeah, like, as you mentioned, there's sparks and it almost looks like firecrackers and like little explosions
Yeah,
going off, and the sprinkler system is activated. I wrote this note down in my notebook. It looked like this was a dangerous scene to film.
it
Like
did.
I felt like the reactions of the actress was probably like, "Are you fucking sure this is okay, guys? Because I feel like this might be my last scene ever." Um, but yeah, there I mentioned Alien a second ago. the birth scene, if you want to call it that, of Hideki when he finally reveals himself, reminded me of a specific scene in the first Alien where I think it's when Veronica Cartwright is about to buy it, and you see the alien head coming up, and it's kind of like raining in that scene, and it's sort of coming up over her shoulder, and it's all slimy and weirdly lit. Cross that with Freddy's birth scene from Nightmare on Elm Street 4 in the junkyard, which came out the same year as this.
Right.
Like, you put those two together aesthetically, and you get like a drawn out version as he comes out of his brother's body and he's all slimy, and you don't get a really good look at him. So it's mysterious and weird.
Mm-hmm.
Again, chef's kiss.
It is a chef's kiss. The fact that you don't really get to see at any real point the full body. You get glimpses, you get ideas of this mutant brother, if you will, but you don't actually ever see it fully. At one point, an umbilical comes around and wraps around her neck. You're like, holy crap, because it's great because Hideki's jumping around, and we got a view earlier of these explosive chemicals in here, paint thinner and that they've been using to dispose of bodies. You get the idea. Anyway, he's over there and she shoots the explosive, which again, another wonderful beat the trope moment is that she gets the gun at one point, and someone asked her, "Oh, do you have experience?" And where a lot of times it would be like, "Oh no," or whatever, she goes, "Oh no, I have. Our crew filmed in the Philippines," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like,
yeah, we went to a shooting range in the Philippines.
Yeah. So she had at least some experience with a gun. Well, I'm like, well, that's a little different. And it shows up later because she blows up the container. She thinks she gets Hideki, but then Hideki wraps this umbilical cord around her neck because he jumped up into the ceiling fan. and then the suave brother, who's almost dead, manages to reabsorb, we think, Hideki. But it's a horror film. So it's one of those things where in a horror film, when you get a scene like you do here, where you think the brother has vanquished Hideki by bringing him back into his body as he died, which isn't the case because he shows up again and they got to light him on fire.
I mean, it's all charred and weird looking. Yeah.
He's all charred and coming at her and weird looking, and he gets knocked out a window and falls over and it just shatters. I mean, this is not a quick dispatch of your final villain. This battle between our final girl and the villain goes on for a lengthy time for what it is. This guy doesn't die easy. And in the many films where I was going with this, he falls over, she looks out, she sees the smashed body dissolve, burnt all the crisp, yay. And then she goes walking through the sprinkler system, and then she like passes out or whatnot. I think they find her later in the hospital, or we cut to the hospital. I'm like, if we didn't cut to the hospital, I'd say she was okay. The minute we go to the hospital, I go, she's got the mutant somewhere in her. I'm like, the mutant's in here. We cut to the hospital and everything's fine. I'm like, especially when the detective goes, "We never found the Hideki," and I'm like, ah, shit. I'm like, crap, shit, crap. When's it coming out? Where is it? Come on.
And that's the one note against this movie that I've got. Aside from that middle section, which they could have chopped 10 minutes off and it would have been fine. This movie is an hour 40. It could have been an hour 30.
Hour 30,
But at the end, it's enough because I want to give the actress her due. Nami is played by Miyuki Ono.
Fantastic.
She does a great job of when she realizes that this thing is inside of her, she starts choking and like clawing at her neck, and like her shirt's kind of open and you can see, some bandages and stuff. And she's just like ripping at herself. And at one point she collapses against a wall and starts to slide down. And I thought if she slid down out of frame and it just cut to black, that's all the information you need. She's been infected by this thing or whatever, and it's going to, maybe start compelling her to kill people. Instead, we get, I thought the tastelessness hit its peak during the van rape scene. But no,
No.
she gives birth to this thing, and at first, like, that's coming out awfully low to be bursting out of her chest. Oh no, it's underneath her skirt, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's coming up between her legs, and it's even doing
Mhm.
this weird, like, rocking back and forth motion, and then it says "mommy." I'm like, no, sorry, Mr. Writer Director, work out your issues somewhere else. This is supposed to be mass entertainment.
Well, now in Hideki, instead of being a sibling, is a child of the person. Though I would suspect Nami would end up killing. I think right after that you see her killing the mutant baby if she
I
survived.
I don't know
Yeah,
if she can. It's like
yeah,
because it had some kind of a psychic hold over its older
that's true.
brother.
That's true.
So I don't know.
It's hard to say. Yeah, the end, the very very end. I was hoping it would end a little bit differently, but you kind it especially for an 80s horror film, you kind of like, okay, that's kind of your standard. But up until that point, you know, even with the extreme stuff in here, this is a well-crafted horror film, I
Yeah.
think.
It's I was kind of teasing you about like how can they have all these Evil Dead movies that don't have anything to do with like Sam Raimi's Evil Dead?
Mhm.
But so far these have been some great discoveries that I was not aware of. And it kind of suffers from that problem. Like Evil Dead Trap, it sounds like a generic like knockoff movie, but it really
Right.
is its own thing. Like if you called this, Haunted Brothers or something like that, just take that expectation away from it. I think this would be more on people's radar than it is.
I think it would possibly be, I think part of it is the extremism of it, turns some people off, so that's probably why it may not be discussed as much. And I know what we're saying. You're like, well, extremism. I mean, you get slashers like Jason, and I'm like, no, no. I'm
No,
like,
no.
if you've watched any, especially the 80s, early 90s, the number that I've watched anyway of extreme Asian horror uh, cinema. No, nothing that you saw in the West in Western slasher films is really comparable to the level that they take things and how good it looks, which adds that extra level of disturbance to it. Another film that I bring up quite a bit that our good friend Doc introduced me to, which actually Unearthed Films now put out as well, is Dr. Lamb. Dr. Lamb is a film that is got a little comedy worked in. It's a crime procedural more than a horror film, but interesting concept, and it's got some brutally extreme kills at one point. Basically, it's about a taxi cab driver who is fine until it starts raining, and then he wigs out and becomes a psychotic killer. Yeah, it's wild. It's another wild one, man, and it's got a bit of crime procedural in it and horror elements. Yeah, so Dr. Lamb is another one of those. But of the ones that I've watched, it's just a different approach. It's really, going for it and not just doing the shock like haphazardly. There is there's work put into how realistic it looks because they want it to be impactful. They want it to stick with you, and it will. Um, I know the eye scene alone in the first 10 minutes of this film, I'm just like, oh my God, because I've dissected a cow eye in biology, and I'm just like, that is way too real, you know. And even the scene, the way they do it, there's some twitching above and below the eye as it's being stabbed, so it really almost looks like someone's getting jabbed in the eye.
Well,
Just
and I think that's what makes me so squeamish is even the many ways that they shoot this, it never looks like, oh, here's where they bring in the fake eye.
no.
Always looks like you really freak someone out by dissecting their eye for the sake of cinema.
There- there's not much trivia on this. One bit of trivia is Japanese porn stars were used in the filming of this movie, uh, which is interesting because if that's the case, they've actually have some acting chops. So, because these characters, the acting in here is solid as well. I watched the subtitled version, and I'm glad I did because you get the authentic performances, and there's solid performances for a horror film in this movie too.
Yeah, I mean that surprised me. Although I wonder if maybe if they're more comfortable doing that, the extreme like nudity and rough stuff. If that's like, oh yeah, this is a Tuesday.
Yeah, this isn't nearly as bad as the last film I did. I don't know. It's hard to say, but yeah, Evil Dead Trap. Your final thought with it?
Check it out. It's on YouTube. It didn't look like it was ripped. It looked like there's some, I don't know if it was the horror channel or, some
Yeah.
like something they have it up. So, and it was a decent transfer. So definitely check it out. It's not for the faint of heart, but as we've mentioned, we've talked about Saw and The Ring and,
Mhm.
Basket Case and a whole bunch of other movies that, if not explicitly influenced by this, you can watch this movie and see where other people have taken similar concepts in other
Mhm.
directions that got a lot more notoriety in the mainstream than this movie did.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, it's on Amazon Prime as well. Just
Oh,
recently, I think it just got put on there, so you could watch it there as well. But if you got Amazon Prime, it looks like it's free if you got with Prime.
cool.
But yeah, I agree. You know, we've said it before, and I will always advocate. Don't be afraid to watch older films. If nothing else, you can see where influences came from. I've heard about this film talked about in many horror talks and that, and people talking about horror films. And just looking at this, if it didn't directly influence these filmmakers, it may have subconsciously, but there's a lot of things in here that you will find familiar. And the approach though, and the way this film plays out is interesting. It's got weight to it. It's got thought put into it. It's not just extreme for extreme. It's not just these people aren't there just as fodder. And yeah, I recommend it quite a bit. Definitely a solid film, an Evil Dead Trap from 1988. So there you have it, folks. Thank you, X-Ray Punch, and all of those that have tuned into our live broadcast. Love the chat. Always great to get interaction with our audience, and it's very cool. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed this conversation as well. And again, here is our chance to give the license to shill to Mr. Ian Simmons so you can find out where all of his fantastic stuff is at.
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. You can also find me on YouTube. Just look up Kicking the Seat on YouTube. We do, interviews and movie reviews and roundtables and all that good fun stuff. In fact, next week I'll be breaking my comic book movie moratorium to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And all sorts of fun stuff going on there. So check it out.
Although it is a bit telling that the fact that you don't really need to watch anything since you've watched the Loki series till now to know what's going on in Quantumania tells you a
That's
lot about Phase 4.
It tells me that they're trying to skip over most of Phase 4 and just go forward.
And just
Yeah.
go forward. Yes. Well, go
Ugh.
forward, everyone out there. Join us next week. Just to drop it now, for those of you who do tune into the live show, as always, we appreciate it. But we will be moving tonight. We're recording on a Monday night. Coming in March, that will be our regular night. We are still Tuesday the next 2 weeks, but after that, starting in March, we will be Monday nights, same bat time, 9:30 p.m. Central Time, but on Monday nights instead of Tuesday because I'm old. So we'll just put it that way. I'm old. I get up real early for work on Wednesdays, and yeah. So in March, begins with M. Think of it. Look for us live Monday nights at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. where I don't know what March's theme is going to be. It all depends on what the Wheel of Random will give us next week when we talk about another Perfect 10 film. And by Perfect 10, I mean it's celebrating its 10th anniversary, just like we are this year. And we're looking at the Evil Dead remake 2013.
And it's in keeping with our theme of having nothing to do with the Evil Dead.
Well, we will see how that conversation goes next week, folks. So tune in for that there. That will be Tuesday night. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Subscribe and all that fun stuff on our YouTube channel, as well as on our podcast here. And we're found wherever you get your podcasts. So until next time, we will just say good night, everyone.
Good night.